Welcome to Getting Rich Together, the show for successful women who are looking to take their financial futures to the next level. I'm your host, Shama Bunton. When I started my wealth building journey, nobody knocked on my door to give me all the answers. So I want to talk to the experts who've done it and bring the answers to you so we can discover the right opportunities that will help us achieve the financial futures we've always dreamed of together and have fun doing it. So let's dive into this episode and start getting rich together. I am here today with someone who I deeply respect, admire, have the best time in the world with, and someone who's really brilliant, the incredible Dia Bondi. Now, Dia, one of the things that I love the most about you is how bold and courageous you are, not just within your own work and all the ways in which you've grown your business and impact, but in the ways in which you service clients, support businesses, and ultimately help transformational leaders find their voice and be able to really find opportunities and be, I'd say, a guide by your side to be able to help you make these big decisions. You are also the author of a book that I think give to just about everybody, Ask Like an Auctioneer, which I think just pushes everyone to think about their life in a much larger and bigger capacity. Thank you so much for being here today on Getting Rich Together. I'm grateful to have you.
I'm so happy to be here. And I've been listening to all the shows since the very, very first launch. And it's just a thrill to see everything go to the moon.
Oh, well, happy to be on the rocket ship with you, my love. Let's get started as to where it all began. Dia, take us back. You have a real rockin' haircut. I'm curious, was Dia Bondi at 7, 10, 12 years old, rocking a badass haircut, super outspoken? What was she like? Where were you living? What was life like around you? And ultimately, what were some of the money stories you were picking up?
Yeah, the question of did I have awesome hair? I can't even speak to that. I have no idea. And what was awesome in the 80s, I couldn't process. I couldn't promise is actually like objectively awesome. I was outspoken, and I like to say, now that I'm a mom, I like to say that the things that are sort of a liability in us as children become our great asset when we become adults. And my sort of willingness to speak up and talk back got me in trouble a lot. Now it's one of the most important assets that I have working with my clients, and some of the most high stakes moments that I've done my leadership communications work in, like being able to challenge power and authority in a way that also maintains rapport. That's the thing that was missing when I was a kid, has been really an asset. So I grew up in Sonoma County, about an hour drive north of the Golden Gate Bridge, in a small town. It was small then, and now it's not so small. It was the cul-de-sac of the North Bay, meaning you go very much north of us and you're into Windsor and Ukiah and ending up in the redwoods up there. There wasn't a lot. I grew up in a small neighborhood on the west side of town. That was the annexed non-city part of the city, in a really, really humble post-war house in one of the sort of brokest neighborhoods in Sonoma County. At the same time, it was always weird because my parents were very, I guess you could call them woke people at the time. My dad was a master's in literature, but he ran a small construction company. My whole family were all, from aunts and uncles, grandparents, they were all small business owners, though. No career people in my world. All small business. My aunt owned a ballet school. My grandfather had a small insurance brokerage. My dad had his small construction company.
Dia, was it one of those things where you saw them, when you were seeing them around you, where they had these businesses for a very long time? Or did you participate in seeing sort of, let's call it the small business startup culture, I guess, of your families starting these businesses?
Yeah, when I was very young, my dad worked for a guy named KJ, and then I feel like there was some moment in time, I don't remember exactly when it was, where my dad said, I'm leaving KJ and me and my best friend, his childhood friend Dave, are going to go start our own thing. And I remember seeing that. And one of the things that that still is with me from that time is my dad used to say something like, don't buy a dump truck till you need a dump truck. Meaning you sell the work first and then you buy the equipment you need to do the work. But you never make a huge investment and then hope that it plays out. Do you know what I mean? Like you go win the work and then you hustle to put it together to deliver that work. And then you deliver the work, you make some money on that work. And now you have a dump truck that a client paid for. That's the kind of stuff that I was growing up with. But I never called it entrepreneurship. It was mostly just like, how do we get through this season and make some money? It was not a discussion about some big dream. It was just like, I don't want to work for anybody anymore. I'm going to go hustle some work myself. Dave and I are going to do it. And we'll buy a dump truck as soon as we get our first gig, kind of thing.
Now, that's so interesting. Like this idea of being the own source of your own income or seeing that modeled very young. Like this idea of if it's going to be, it's up to me. And if there's going to be something generated, it's going to be from my intelligence or my ability to be scrappy or see the opportunity. So when you were younger, did you exercise that? So, were you risk averse?
No, 100%. Like when I was a kid, I didn't really have a job until my 30s. I'm going to be honest. My young years were like mowing lawns, working for my dad a little bit, like brooming concrete in the middle of the summer. That was fun. Going to the lumber yard for him. Those were unpaid jobs that I had, by the way. And then later it was, a lot of mowing lawns. It was a lot of, I remember summers in high school I worked at restaurants. So I had those kinds of things, but I never had a career job until I was in my 30s. Always putting something together for myself. I remember running a dance camp in the summer. I was like, I got to make a couple grand this summer. So I rented out a community center for pennies on the dollar, talked them into giving it to me. And then I went around to all the middle schools and dropped flyers and put together 2 sessions of a summer dance camp on a shoestring and then kept the money. I did that kind of stuff, knocking on doors myself from very early days. Yeah.
And so when you were in high school then, or starting to think about how you were developing or exporting yourself in the world, was the vision I'm just gonna, if you didn't get a corporate job or a regular job until your 30s, was the early vision something around I'm going to build a business or I'm going
Shama, the vision was I got to get out of here. That was the vision. 100% I got to get out of here. And I never really had a big picture. I just knew I wanted to get out of here. Now I can actually contradict myself and say, I did have a picture of I got to get out of here. I wanted to travel the world on somebody else's nickel. I wanted to be a visit. I wanted to feel like the planet was a planetary system and that I was going to go visit Jupiter and Mars. I wanted to see how other people lived and see how other people work, but I didn't really say that I want to be a VP of fill in the blank. I want to build a career in finance. I didn't have that picture for myself. Now, because I grew up in such a worker type of identity, I did have a little fantasy about being in the contexts that were much more about enterprise and corporate America. But I remember so distinctly, Shama, I was sitting, I majored in economics, weirdly, international economics, because of a coaching conversation I had with the head of the department that was the most compelling and conversation I'd had with another adult ever. And I think was probably my first coaching conversation. It made me say yes to international economics as a major because I wanted to be around that kind of conversation some more. And when I was done with school, the next thing to do was going to be things like going to apply for jobs. So I applied for jobs at the state of California and with a bunch of banks. And I remember very specifically being in an interview in a cubicle on the 14th floor of some building in the financial district in San Francisco. And it was for the World Bank. And it was something about, it was so long ago. I'm 51 today at this recording, so it's been a long time. But it was an analyst job where I would be monitoring bank consolidations. And I remember so distinctly having a feeling halfway through that conversation, I can't be here. I can't do this. I can't be in a building. I cannot do this. I remember I think my dad was actually waiting for me downstairs. And I broke out in an internal sweat, and I left feeling like there's no way. I couldn't come here every day and sit in this box. No possible way I can work my way up. It's not happening.
It almost feels like you had a soul moment where it was like, I don't think some people get those until like much later in life, where it's like, I'm being faced in this moment with the path that most people take, and then with being honest and true to who I am in the world. And I'm going to choose the scarier thing, which is listening to yourself.
Yeah, but Shama, it wasn't even a choice. It was a reaction. So I just don't want folks to think that I had this epiphany moment. It was in one way, but it was almost like I was coming out of my skin. It wasn't like a thing that I listened to and then made a choice. It was like, it was a reaction. Does that make sense? But what that meant was, if I can't do this, and this is the picture of what it's supposed to look like, you enter as an analyst, and then you monitor bank consolidations for some period of time. Then you become a senior analyst, and then you do this thing, and then you get into a place where your own decisions, and like this sort of corporate ladder, so to speak. And I know it's not a perfect set of steps going up to the top of wherever you're going. But the bottom dropped out, and I was like, what am I going to do? And that put me on about a year and a half of, what do I really want to do? And not the do, I would say, what context do I want to be in? What kind of transformation do I want to be involved in? Did I say context just a second? I'll say it again. Context do I want to be in every day? I wanted that feeling when you walk into a room and you're like, oh, I know what this room is about, and I want to be here.
So how old were you thinking? How old were you at this moment where you gave yourself this year and a half?
I think I was 23. I took a gap year between high school and college. So I think I was 23. I got married when I was 26, and it was about 2 years before we got married, I think. I got married super young to my high school sweetheart.
So while you're not giving yourself any credit for this like deep visceral reaction, you should give yourself some credit here for the knowingness of the reflection that you did end up taking, because that does not, again, I think, come easily to young people, especially then. Right now we have all these people around us and opportunities to see how creatively people live. But back then, things were really cut and dry and black and white. And so as you were going through this discovery phase, what did you come out on the other end with? At the end of sort of taking this time, was it a clear roadmap? Was it a motivator? Was there a financial motivator? Were you scared at any moment about, will I be able to pay for things? Like, were there any sort of fears around the money side, or was it really sort of heart and like, where do I want to put my mind and my spirit?
That's really interesting. I don't remember worrying about money. You asked me at the beginning of this conversation, what were some of the money stories that I was coming away from my growing up with? And I can share those because they're tied to why I was never thinking about, where am I going to make a great living? How am I going to build wealth? It was more like, how do I want to spend my wealth of minutes on this planet? That's more what it was. So I spent a year and a half looking at, what do I want? Where do I want to be? And what do I want to do? And so I went on this great treasure hunt. And at that point, it's funny, like when I say I didn't have a job, it's not that black and white. Like I did work. I worked all the time. I started working when I was 12 years old, cleaning my grandfather's insurance office. He did pay me in cash and pancakes. But I mostly at that time was working in the fitness space, which was great because I was a 1099. And for folks who are listening abroad, that just means I was not on payroll. I would teach a class and they'd pay me a set amount for that. And I'd submit my number of classes I taught and they'd pay me a bulk amount for that. And I was accountable for paying my own taxes.
What were you teaching? What class were you teaching?
Oh, honey, I was teaching early when the very first Schwinn bikes came out for spinning. So spin was brand new. I was teaching step aerobics. Yes, I was. I was teaching body pump. I was teaching sculpting classes. Like I was teaching all those things. Wasn't quite jazzercise, but it was like the next iteration of jazzercise, just so you know. But it was great for me in college and beyond college because I'd make 50, 60, 75, $125 an hour, depending on what class I was teaching. And I'm in rooms with anywhere from 4 to 50 women of all shapes and sizes from all these different backgrounds. And it was a wonderful way for me to have a interplanetary adventure in my very own backyard because I got to meet so many different people and work with them in a way that was actually quite vulnerable with their bodies. I had a lot of women that came into those classes who were like, I haven't been in a fitness environment since I got shamed by how many push-ups I could do in middle school. This is very loaded for me. Am I safe with you? Like that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So I was teaching classes and I was spending that year and a half finding out, learning what I cared about and what was possible because I didn't know. My parents were worried about helping my aunt build sets for the annual Nutcracker show and my dad making sure that the dump truck wasn't broken. In that year, I just did what you'd think of today as informational interviews. And during that time, I was going to my classes where regular women were, regularly people were in these classes, men and women, but I taught at a fair number of places where density of people in my classes were women. And I learned about, and I was talking into the mic and telling jokes and laughing at my own process and telling people the story of my next adventure or my last adventure, who I'd spoken to, what head of sales what I'd learned and who I accidentally cursed in front of and all that stuff. And one day, this woman gets off her bike, my friend Jen. I was just texting with her this last week, actually. And she came up to me. We didn't know one another. She was in the back. She was in the back of my spin class. She got off her bike, came up to me after class and said, look, you're funny. And you have a lot of great energy in front of the room. And I am an executive coach for somebody who runs a small training company. And he would love you. And he's looking to bring on a new trainer. And I was like, what is that? And at that time, it was corporate training and development. Right now, we call it professional development, but then it was training. And turns out that he ran a small company that did what you think of as traditional presentation skills training for tech companies in CPG, like all over the planet, packaged foods a lot. And so I came on as his apprentice. I tell that story in my TEDx, and I promise I'm almost done with this part. And actually, Shama, when you graciously invited me to speak at the Women of Wealth Summit in New York, I stayed at his house. Like, we're still friends. He's a longtime mentor of mine. So he brought me on and I spent the next year learning his business. And I still didn't have a job. I was still a 1099. So between gigs, I could still mow lawns if I wanted to.
Oh, and so like at that time, was it more like I'm making this money, I'm going to use it to pay my bills and I have nothing left? Was it I'm making enough money to save some money and pay my bills and go shopping? Like, how were you looking at spending your money during these sort of early years?
My husband and I bought a house before we got married, we were 25. A house my dad made us buy. And so we were very concerned with paying the rent, like paying the mortgage. That's what we cared about. And that's where it all went. And I didn't make very much money. And it was on a day rate. And this is the time when folks you could do independent contractor work. And the issue of, are you on payroll or are you not? Are you an employer or you're not was more slippery. So I got paid $1,000 a day to go out and fly to China and teach a class for 3 days. I come home with $3,000 in my pocket. I didn't get paid for travel. I go to New York and teach a class. I go to Santa Clara and teach a class. I go to Mexico City and teach a class. And I was basically delivering his IP for him, right? Early days, it wasn't a lot of money. And I remember my bookkeeper saying to me, because it didn't get going fast. I wasn't mowing lawns in between gigs, but I was hustling between when he could deploy me on a client engagement, right? As a 1099, they had no obligation to me in between the cracks and crevices of the opportunities for me to go teach. And I remember my bookkeeper saying to me, like, are you out of your mind? This isn't going anywhere. What are you doing? I think I probably taught 20 days for him the first year. He could trust me with the client.
So what were those conversations then like at home, right? So obviously like you and your husband are focused on this, like your first home, and like you're starting to figure out like what you're passionate about and what you're great at and sort of what your uniqueness is. And this is going somewhere, but it's going a little bit slowly. Were you guys having conversations at home like, okay, we need to budget, and how long are we going to focus on working in this capacity? Or was it baby, let's go all the way. And you do this for as long as you need in terms of how to make it profitable. Like what were the early conversations like when you were dipping your toe in something deeply committed and it takes some time, and that's normal, right? It's normal for things to take time.
Super tactical, Shama. So tactical. We talked about things like neither of us spend more than X dollars. I can't remember what it was unless we check with each other first. We were having conversations about how to manage our shared household money because we were barely scraping by. So I sometimes get punched in the face by other folks in my adult life who are like shocked that my husband and I operate with one bank account. And I'm like, it's been 25 years. We're married 25 years this year. And to be fair, we both started with nothing. So this is not two adult wealth buckets merging in an adult life. We were kids together and started from the beginning together. We were business partners from the very beginning. So we were having conversations about how to manage our joint account and like where do we put how do we think about spending? And so we read 2 books. So funny. We read the Susie Orman book that was such a big deal in the 90s, the 9 Steps to Financial Freedom or what it was. And she was talking about Roth IRAs and really basic financial tools like that. I don't even think 529s were a thing yet. And we were still 8 years from having kids. And then the other book we read was The Millionaire Next Door. And that was extremely empowering to us individually and together as a couple, because now we had sort of a shared operating system around what do we care about and what do we not care about? Do we care about having a newly leased car every 3 years that everyone around us could see? No, we did not. What do we care about? And that book gave us an operating system for how we thought about money in a way that is a little bit more dispassionate and more chess pieces on a chessboard, like that.
At such a young age too. Like that's so powerful to both have a partner, right? Just it could be a friend or somebody, but to have a partner where you're like, all right, we're learning this together. We're making a pact. This is how we're operating. And I love what you said about this being, he was your first business partner, right? It's like you guys started together and have been together ever since. And so I think that's powerful. So then when did you start to see from business growing and life changes, like what were some of the next more pivotal things that would start to happen in your personal life or professional life that forced you to start to think about money differently? Was it sizable increases in your take home or salary? Was it precipitated by holy bananas, we have children now? Like when did you start to think about this next level of investing, of ownership, and starting to think about you as leading your own company?
It's embarrassing. Like, if folks can't see me, but I'm shaking my head right now because it's embarrassing to say that I made money really tactical and unimportant for a lot of years. Early in our marriage, after we had read those 2 books and got our hoo-ha together around how we're going to deal with money as a couple, we was in the time in the early aughts when the real estate market was kicking up. So we started buying and flipping homes together. I grew up on a construction site. Like, I'm not afraid of some sheetrock and a couple of 2x4s. You know, I know how to dig a footing. For us, it was that was an opportunity. So we did a few of those, and they were, again, more of a time to fill in the blanks between when I was out on the road teaching communication skills and presentation skills to tech leaders. And I don't even know why we did it. We did it to take advantage of the uptick in the real estate market. It was a thing. It was a way to put my sort of skills to work. I had a lot of support around me, meaning it helps when you have a dad who has a construction company and also knows what to do, and a brother and an uncle and all this. But I didn't really start to take money. I took it very tactically seriously, meaning the moment my husband, he's always been an in-house professional. So the moment that he got hired, I mean, he was pressure washing drill casing for an environmental company for $11 an hour. And they said, do you want to sign up for our 401k? And I was like, yes, we're doing that. The moment that I had any scratch, my grandfather used to call it scratch, it was, I guess I should start a Roth right off the bat. We started a 529 when my kids weren't even born yet. I was pregnant with them. And I was like, we're going to start the 529. We'll put their names on them when we know what their names are. I just made a lot of simple decisions early on that were sort of automated our wealth building But I did it like I was folding clothes, not like I was actually creating anything. I was just tucking myself in. That's paid off now over time. But I made money unimportant. And here it goes back to the conversation where we start. Here it goes back to where we started, Shama, which is because my whole world was small business, and in and around the construction business, it was a boom and bust situation. And so money was a problem. My dad's business would have a great year, and that would be the year they got slammed with a lawsuit because the statute of limitations on construction was expiring at some condo complex they'd poured out 10 years before. He'd have a huge pour out one day, 50, 60 grand worth of concrete, and it would surprise, we'd have a rainstorm, and he'd have to tear it out and pay for it. And so we'd go from we're going to have a great summer to we might lose our house 10 times a year. So for us, that funny story of like more money, more problems was real. In combination with that, my grandfather, I think I've told you this story before, Shama, that my grandfather sold his insurance business. And that year he went to bed for 15 months. And that was very confusing to me because I was like, didn't he just get a payout? But he was wrecked from that transaction. And preparing for this call today, I actually called my dad this morning to go, hey, remember that thing that Grandpa, he was involved in another transaction in the 70s that I wanted the complete story on? And I had a different version in my head than what it was. And it turned out to be a much darker story than what I thought it was, what I suspected it was. It was a transaction he was involved in the 70s around him sort of saving a local business, but it was the circumstances were much more fraught than I understood. And so all of that volatility, Shama, told me money is danger. You make a lot of money, you create a lot of exposure for yourself. So Dia, just set up your Roth, make sure your husband's getting the full match in his workplace, put your head down and work, save that money, but don't worry too much about having too much of it.
Wow. Wow, Dia. I mean, this is like so incredible in many ways because I think that your story around like being disconnected from it and it's like flossing your teeth or brushing your teeth, or it's like, I'm doing this thing. I know I'm supposed to do it. People have told me to do it, but it's a disconnection from both your labor to it because it's operating on its other silo, and then also this like disconnection from the power of it and this power that you're building on the back end, but not even realizing the power that you have and that you had as you were sort of building it. How and like how did you decide at what point to go fully in on your communications platform and starting to really build your business? Here you are, sort of obviously in my mind, if there was someone to like pull off a thing and do a thing, it would be you. So as far as, hey, I need to create a business around XYZ, like you are industrious around like how you think about doing things and getting things done. But this does want to go into business for yourself and create a brand for yourself and put a flag in the ground. It's a big deal. So what were some of the dominoes that fell around making this turn from flipping homes to whatever else might have happened, which you can feel free to divulge.
Lawns, yeah.
Mowing lawns and then saying, okay, we have enough money saved that we can take this next risk? Was it, I already have a book of business that I've been developing and now I can just fully lean into this? How did you emotionally, psychologically, financially set yourself up to be able to do the big leaps that you made?
So I don't know. Meaning like we just sort of slowly started to put together the Legos of our life. And then all of a sudden we were in a position where I could ask questions and have an answer that moved me forward. So I was working, doing these side projects, and then also teaching these classes for my mentor, selling all over the world, which was a wonderful gift. I got to this work I was doing wasn't unimportant to me. It just has to be enough money. It just has to do the job. Money does a job. And I stopped. And it was hard for me to stop when my son was born. My son's 18 now. I stopped when my son was born because I thought I can't be traveling around the world. There were years where I was 3 weeks a month on the road. I'd go to Taiwan, and then I'd go to PRC, and then I'd come home, and then I'd go to Cleveland, and then I'd go to Mexico City, and then I would go back to Cleveland. It was like I was on the road a lot. And so I took a break. I was like, got to figure out, I'm gonna be a stay-at-home mom. I'm gonna figure something out. I don't know what to do. But I knew I needed to be home for a minute. And I got a note one day on LinkedIn that said, "Hey, we are working on a very interesting international project, and we heard you're really good. Can you give me a call?" And this is like pre-massive spam world. So these inquiries were pretty, you just weren't getting spammed like you do today. And I was like, okay. So I got on a phone call. Turns out it was a production. It was one of the producers for the campaign that Rio de Janeiro was running to host the 2016 Olympics. And those campaigns, Shama, look like a presidential campaign. They are a huge investment, extremely high production values. You have to write a 16-book dossier just to even put your hat in the ring once you get to candidate status. It's like a very big, and the process is different now. The IOC has changed it, but at that time it was at its heaviest, most intense. And I said, I had a 1.5-year-old in my arms, and I said, I got this invitation. And my husband said, let's make it work, man. So I went to Rio for a couple of months and worked on that project. Yeah. With a rotating set of grandmas and aunties and husbands who brought my son down and rotated a couple weeks at a time while I went to the IOC, where I went to the work every day. It was so exhausting, I'm going to tell you that. So when I got home from that, I was like, wow, I just got to do something that like 8 people in the world gets to do.
My God, this is amazing. Continue.
I mean, it was an incredible, incredible experience. And it kicked me in the ass in a real way. Both, I learned a lot because I'd never worked at that. I mean, I'm in the room with the president of Brazil at the time, and I'm in the room with a sports minister, and we're in the room with all of these bid leaders and with Olympians. It was just this interesting dynamic, non-business enterprise type of context. And it was a multi-billion-dollar decision that was on the line. Like, stakes couldn't be higher. It was just such a wonderful and difficult challenge to say yes to. And when I got back home from that, I was like, where do I go from here? And I remember saying, I think I'm going to put a shingle out. And the place that I started was I went into the coactive coaching certification program. And we didn't have a lot of extra money at that time because my son was so little and I hadn't been working. And I was like, I want to do this coactive coaching certification. Shout out to all you coactive coaches listening, because I'd never had any formal coaching training and I wanted to it was starting to emerge. And so I remember sitting in our family van talking to my husband and saying, but it's 10 grand. And he was like, I trust you. And that was the beginning of the next thing. Now, when you say I'm enterprising, what I want to do for folks listening is to just give them the BTS, like the behind the scenes, kind of the part where the sausage is getting made, and then not just like, I had this epiphany, and then all these things appeared, and it was like Snow White in the forest. No, it was not that at all.
I'll tell your Snow White story. You can tell the making of
100%. So I knew there was like, I needed to get skillful in these tools. I mean, a lot of the coactive coaching certification was like stuff that I had already known. It was just giving me language for it. I was like, oh, I've been doing that for years. But I wanted to master these skills because I had to pass the certification test. So guess what I did, everyone? I live in the East Bay in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I went to our local large flea market. And one weekend, and I asked the flea market manager if I could have a free stall. And she said, sure, for what? And I said, I'm going to sit here all day and do 20-minute free coaching sessions. And I made a sandwich board and put it in the walkway and a rug and 2 chairs and a couple bottles of water. And I sat it down and I said, free coaching, 20 minutes, have a seat. And I got a lesson. And I skilled myself up. So these were like, I was talking to people who run small trucking companies, people who were dry cleaners, people who were antique brokers. I didn't care who you were. Just sit down. I want to practice this one skill with you. And I always say that confidence is an outcome of action. And I knew I needed to get reps. And so I create situations for myself where I can get reps so that when I go in with a VP of marketing, when I go in with a director of finance, when I go in with an entrepreneur who's, I got to raise $25 million in the next 6 months, how do I, A, be very compelling? B, how do I clarify, what my asks are? C, what is my unique thing I'm bringing to the table that helps the story about my business really sing? I can do it because I got the reps with a guy who runs a small trucking company in the East Bay. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. So as you were sort of getting everything off the ground, you have your certification, you're getting your reps in, like things are moving. Obviously, there's a certain point, I feel like, when you start your own company where there are two questions that come up. One is, okay, now I can start paying myself, right? So first I got to pay for some infrastructure, or I need to, at some point you go from doing it all by myself to I need to hire somebody. Now I'm making less. When do I start making more? What do I start doing with that money? And then obviously thinking about sort of all the different ups and uphill battles that happen with being a solopreneur and a business owner. So for you, when it came to growing this business and then also starting to think about, let's say, the economics of it for yourself personally, like what were some of the things that you did? Most people who are listening who are like, yeah, I want to start or leave a corporate job and transition to doing something on my own. There are ways, I think, that you've been able to sort of masterfully think about what you're bringing in, how you're looking at allocating that, or even from the negotiating side of things, get yourself into some really interesting opportunities. So at what point, I guess, did you start to exercise more creativity around money within the business? And what were some of those moments or inflection points that helped you make either better decisions or that were like, fuck yeah, I did it?
So a couple things. It was incremental. I mean, a lot of it was like challenging my own assumptions about what I could charge for the work I do. That's one of it. That's one piece. So aggressively and appropriately, meaning at the right time and with the right client, raising my rates and being courageous around testing what the market will take. That's number one. Number two, understanding there's a difference between like quarterly bonusing to myself and the month over month cash flow that I need to both operate my business and bring money into our house. Those are two separate things. I treat them separately. So there's that. The third thing is recognizing how much value I was creating. I was walking the dog this morning thinking about, I had a client this week who we designed, she was leading an industry meeting, and it was not very many folks in the room, probably 30 to 40. And we worked this month to help her put her story together, and very importantly, the ask at the end of the story that she was making of the people that she had convened at this summit, right? And if everyone said yes in that room, the value she would have created with that story and that ask could be worth tens of millions of dollars. So recognizing that the work that I'm doing isn't about the work I'm doing, it's about the outcomes that are created. So for folks who are listening, yeah, tie yourself to that whenever you can. And then the last thing was recognizing that I needed to stop being so afraid of money. Stop treating it it has utility, but I treated it as just utility. But to think about how I could participate in the upside for some of these moments that I create with my clients. I've told the story at the Wealth Catalyst Summit that I started getting smart about thinking about baseline cash that I'm working with clients and also taking shares. And I made a $36,000 contract a few years ago, turn into converted it to $1 million payout. Does that mean that happens all the time? Absolutely not. I had another deal similar to that the company almost went into an acquisition and instead went poof. But the question is, how do you think about participating in the value creation that you're a part of, even when you're not in-house? even when you don't have a badge to the building for the organization you're working with, metaphorically or otherwise. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. I think that's such an important foundational lesson, no matter what business you're in or what you're doing, around sort of these concepts of value creation and what these outcomes can look like. So I love the story around creatively getting into contracts, having $1 million payout. I think it's so powerful to be able to show, especially with your book, Ask Like an Auctioneer, and the work you do. It's what a wonderful way to say, hey, look at what I've done. And here are my personal experiences with this, as well as sort of aggregating the experiences of the hundreds and hundreds of people that you've worked with and help shape their businesses and how they show up in the world. But the personal narrative, I think, is powerful. As you started to then realize this new wealth or new money that was coming in, which is pretty much sudden wealth, right? It's like you go from one day being like, okay, let's business as usual, to then, oh, there's this liquidity event or this thing that's happening. How have you, and certainly yourself personally, but then also going back to your OG business partner, right? Your husband, how have you guys started thinking about, okay, now that we've been living our lives in this particular way with this sort of money mindset and strategy, you've pulled some levers on revenue streams, building the business, platforming, but now there's the sudden wealth moment. How have you guys been rethinking or retooling sort of what strategy looks like, and what has that process been like?
So we've been fairly quiet. I'm going to be honest, because the stakes are really high for us. Our kids right now are at the most expensive they'll ever be, meaning like I've got a kid that's on his way to college. I have another kiddo who is still 3 years away, but we're investing heavily in her athletic ambitions. And so we've been fairly risk averse. B, we've been focused really a lot on pressing down our monthly outflow, keeping our cash flow needs at the absolute minimum so that we have space. Because Shama, space for us has huge amount of value. Huge. So we don't use these events to think about what we can consume, but instead what we can depress in the outflow and the needs of our lives so that we can have freedom and peace. Been a really important recognition. Yeah, I mean, you're putting your hand in your heart. What's that? How does that hit you?
Yeah, I mean, I think this idea of protecting the thing that's most important in the whole world, which is like our time, our energy, who we spend time with. I mean, these are the most valuable things, right? Alongside our health and sort of protecting our loved ones. And I think looking at your life through this lens of how can I better protect the most important thing, which in this case is not how do I protect my assets in a way that feels scarcity oriented, but more like how can I protect the most precious moments and time and energy and sort of use money as a way to support that, I think is really beautiful.
Thank you. 100%. And sometimes there's we should be doing something more creative with this. And you know what? But the truth is that like where we sit in our marriage and our life is that the piece of having a low cost of living has been instrumental in giving us choice and having some flexibility. So now our kids are just about to go on to school and we have some capital sitting around, and I'm asking the questions right now because our risk profile is going to change because we're weirdly, both of my kids are about to go to college, and I'm just going to say the words 529, everybody, that I can't believe my son's about to go away to school, and I don't have to take a second breath. I can just write checks right out of his 529. It's unbelievable to me, the power of that freedom being able to continue into the time when we would otherwise be pulling college fees out of our cash flow. That's given us incredible amount of freedom. So we're now having the conversation of what's next when they're out, and alternative investments is the question, and real estate is one of them. So that might be the place where we think about that next. But again, it's been not complicated. It's about having enough cash in the bank that a lot of liquidity, so we feel pretty cozy, and making our lives inexpensive for the sake of freedom.
I love that so much. And so how, as you're now coming on, gosh, over 15 years of being in business, right, with your platform and these changes that are happening in your personal life, the kids are getting older. I mean, life is about to sort of have there's another wave of changes and shifts that are happening. And certainly I feel like these days we are living so much longer. And it's like life is sort of really different now than it was 20 years ago when it was like, all right, we're retiring at 65 and we're going to live to 77 and that's it. Right now, things are really different. And so as you're sort of looking at, I don't want to parallel this, but your business and the impact that you're creating, again, in the lives of these leaders of companies, in their personal life, in their business, like how they're showing up. So this transformational work that you're doing there. And then also thinking about what's next and legacy and starting to tee yourself up for this, let's call it next stage of what life is like. I mean, my gosh, Gia, if we all live until early 100s, like you're a baby and you got another 50 years. It's like there's a lot more time ahead of us. How are you sort of contexting and thinking about business, life, legacy? What are those conversations happening?
So I'm freaking out about it right now because it's a shift in identity too, Shama. We go through these phases in our lives and our careers where we identify as an entrepreneur, as a mother, we have these different identities that we attach ourselves to. And I'm in the midst of a transformation of being a mommy who packs snacks for her kids to a mommy who is just a supportive presence. That's a very different way of being a mom. And so I'm in the middle of switching that identity. My husband and I are going to be heading into our third marriage together. And I think about just this third phase. And I think about what is the portfolio of my professional and earning life? I recognize that as I get older, I want to do more things well enough that I continue get to feel like I'm doing interplanetary travel, but domestically, but at home, where I can touch a little bit of this, I can touch a little bit of that, I can work with this kind of client and that kind of client, I can make this investment over here. The thing that we're interested in is student housing investments. Actually, that's interesting and fun to think about in certain markets, tier 2 markets in lifestyle cities is what we're thinking about. That may not happen, but we're putting our business plan together for that now, that meaning the next chapter. So I think about it's not one thing. More and more, I'm like, it's okay for me to have 4 things I'm doing and have them all be productive from a spirit perspective, a financial perspective, and a value creation perspective, even if it's value I don't get to participate in. I want to be involved with the builders in the world. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I think it's beautiful. The richness of your story, it cuts like beautiful chocolate cake. It's like there's so much, it's like dense and there's some nuts in there and delicious. And I'm so appreciative of your willingness to pull back the lens and help us broaden the aperture and see sort of everything that's happening underneath what otherwise looks like Dia Bondi out there conquering the world all the time, which is certainly one angle and perspective. One of my favorite things in life is obviously money can give us so much as far as security. It can help us obviously afford kids going to school, all these things. It seems like I was going to ask you some of your favorite ways in which you're spending your money. I know that money is sort of being channeled for you as an opportunity to, again, protect the things that are most important to you, your time and energy. But outside of that, suspending sort of those sort of ideas, when it comes to, and I hate to use the word more frivolous, but when it comes to more like Dia Bondi spending money on some fun things for herself, or maybe some things that are giving you a smile on your face or things that do excite you, are there some things and ways in which you like to spend your money?
I knew you were going to ask me this, and I have a terrible, I don't have a strong answer. It's always been in the experiences world. I've listened to a lot of your guests, and that seems to be a strong bucket for folks. But in the experiences, it's usually about, it's going to sound funny, but It's on equipment. And I'm not talking about dump trucks, although maybe. Okay, hang on. When I was a kid, all my friends wanted to be like nurses and firefighters and doctors and teachers and whatnot. I wanted to be, actually, now that you asked me this, it's like hitting me now. I wanted to be a long haul truck driver. I had a picture in my mind that I would be driving coast to coast in my very own shiny 18-wheeler. And I could be the only woman voice on the CB radio, given the like breaker 5 over, I'm coming up behind you. Like I wanted that.
Oh my God, I love that.
And so when I say equipment, I'm saying experiences, but it's more like, the best gloves that I could find and use when I was doing obstacle course racing in my 40s. I did a bunch of Spartan racing and like I got the best shape of my life. And I was like, what are the gloves that I can use for the monkey bars that aren't going to tear me up? Before my kids were born, my husband and I got into motorcycles. So I learned how to ride a racing style motorcycle. And I was like, what's the motorcycle? When I think about now, I'm like, what's the inflatable boat we can carry around in the back of our truck and drop into any lake anywhere without a trailer and go find something that nobody else can see? It's equipment, Shama. I'm so shocked.
It's gear. It's like gear. Like you like gear. It's super badass, Dia. I love that so much. My final question to you is really, and this I think is the ultimate. Obviously, I want everyone who's listening to go out and buy your book, Ask Like an Auctioneer. I think it's wonderfully written. I think there are so many concepts to inspire, to share with others. But what are some things you're calling in and how can our audience really support you right now? What is it you're wanting?
Look, absolutely go. The book's purpose is to help 1 million women ask for more and get it and use asking as a success strategy so we can put more money and decision-making power in their hands so we can change everything for all of us. And if that's resonant for you, get the book and gift it to a woman entrepreneur in your life, somebody who you know that is at the beginning of trying to make the kinds of asks that can really propel them forward. That's number one. Number two, I'm really betting on, instead of going out to clients now, bringing them to me. And a new program I launched is called the Transformational Voice Intensive. I host it 3 times a year in Northern California on a private vineyard estate in a refurbished old vineyard barn. It's a 2.25-day experience where leaders, founders, and influential voices can come together and develop, with my stewardship, a strong leadership voice that they can use to deploy into the initiatives that they are running and the ventures that they're building. So check it out at diabondi.com, share it with your friends, consider joining. And I think if you read my book or somebody in your world does and it makes a difference, let me know. You can send me a note to dia@diabondi.com. Writing a book is like shouting into the void sometimes. And so hearing that it made a difference to you is a huge blessing for me.
Yeah, you're the best. I love you so very much. Thank you for being this brilliant meteor on this planet and shining brightly and taking risks and holding everyone else's hands as we take risk and require some guidance and insight and the right vehicles to do. There's no better woman to do this work, no better human to do this work than you. So thank you very much for being here today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Getting Rich Together. Please take a minute to subscribe. And if you like this episode, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend who is ready to elevate their financial future. Until next time, let's keep getting rich together.